Hey, friends and clients. I am Jennifer Walker Gates with JLW Immigration Law Group, here with my associate attorney, colleague, friend, Diego Nuñez. Hey, Diego, how you doing?
Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Really good. TGIF, it's
Mm-hmm.
Friday, so
And
hooray for that.
how?
Huh?
And how?
And how?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, so we've been asked to talk today about the citizenship interview process and what happens if somebody fails their citizenship interview or test. This is something that is a really important topic for those, tens of thousands of people who are applying for naturalization, because that interview is really the moment in the case that is the highest stakes, I think, for most people. So I know I have had experience with this, and I know that you have as well. And so I was hoping I could pick your brain a little bit today about how that works, what the interview is like, what happens if somebody doesn't pass, and what are the risks of failing your citizenship test.
Oh,
Are you
definitely.
down to talk with me about that?
Oh,
Awesome.
yeah. Let's do it.
Awesome. Okay. So I was thinking, Diego, like before we kind of like dive into the actual test itself, that maybe you could just give us an overview of the interview process and what the interviews are like, kind of at a high level.
Well, so the general process, I would say, and I'll go by the San Antonio standard, which is the case where we normally go. Um, the process of the actual interview on in San Antonio. Well, first, you go through security, you get your number, and you're waiting. Uh, First thing is going to happen is that the officer is going to call your number or your name, and you're going to, and you would go with us, or if you're going on your own, you go on your own. You can't have your family member with you at the interview, and you're going to present that interview notice with that number. And many officers will ask you right off the bat, like, get out your identification, and you're going to follow that officer to their personal office where they're going to conduct the interview. And um, there are some places that will do it a little bit different. About 10 years ago or so in Houston, you would do the test before they would interview you. They would do the civics test right before, and then you would go see the officer, and the person who would do the test for you was different from the individual that was going to interview you. So I don't know if they're still doing that, but that was the process in Houston. And so you go with the officer. You're going to, again, they may ask again to see your identification, to see your passport. Once they identify you, they're going to ask you to raise your right hand, and they're going to put you under oath.
What does that mean, put you under oath?
Well, they're going to make you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And so,
what legal consequence does that have?
Well, so for the citizenship process, in order to be eligible, you have to show 5 years of good moral character prior to the time of filing and throughout the time that your application is pending. And if there is any kind of misrepresentation, even if it shouldn't have an effect on your actual application, if you lie, if they think you've lied, that is reason enough to deny you. And the way that it affects you is that it will prohibit you from applying for 5 years. Now, an accusation of lying and actually lying are two different things. And that's reason why an attorney should be present, because there are things that could be, misunderstandings. And then there can be things that are actual lies.
Yeah.
And
that's reason number one.
Reason number one, yes. And And because they have this high standard, you want to make sure that things are understood well. And that's, and English is the other standard, right? You're going to be tested on your English. And as we were talking before going on to starting the video, the standard is like a common usage conversational English. You don't have to be an English scholar in order to pass the test, but you have to know enough to be able to understand the application. And what's funny is that the application has some phrases and some words that are not in common usage now, that may have been in the, Ellis Island late 1800 days, right? And
Definitely.
another reason why, well, you should at least have a dictionary or have an attorney, because they can explain to you what those words mean and how they're understood by the Immigration Service. And the last thing I'll say is that the majority of the interviewers, once they identify once you are identified and sworn in, they'll usually start with the civics test, and then the reading, and then the writing. And after that, you proceed with the actual application. And that's not, let's say once you finish that last reading or writing test, that's not the end of it, because you're still being tested throughout the whole application, because you need to understand what's being said, including, and most vital, the oath of allegiance. And so that's a little quick summary.
Ironically, the weirdest and kind of most antiquated part of the whole application, and in my opinion, is the oath of allegiance, because I do think you're right that it was like 19th century Ellis Island where that was probably cooked up. And it's like, language like, are you willing to? Yeah, exactly. Are you, do you have no titles of nobility or, potentate that you are willing to relinquish? Or do you have, are you willing to perform work of national importance under civilian direction? Nobody talks like that anymore. And so, but I have seen officers really drill down on that, because they really want people to understand how those promises that we make when we take the oath of allegiance, what do those actually mean in everyday? What do those mean to the person, to the applicant? What do they mean in everyday usage? What do they mean, if the person doesn't want to take the oath of, like, I've had one client who was a Quaker and was not willing to bear arms on behalf of the United States, which is another weird old phrase. And, how does that work? So I think that, definitely, if not taking an attorney with you, which is the best approach, in my opinion, even if you didn't hire an attorney to file the application, if you can take an attorney with you when you go, I think that makes that critical moment of the interview so much more likely to go smoothly. Because how often have you seen clients, Diego, where they didn't take somebody with them to the first interview and they're in your office because they didn't pass? How often have you seen that?
Yeah, that's happened a lot. And I would say about maybe 12 years ago, one of the things that I would see very often, individuals that would go on their own that had problems would have been if they had a prior criminal history. And it wasn't anything that would disqualify them or make them removable. Maybe they had an arrest and it was dismissed, but they would inform about how they felt that they were treated in the process, and the hostility that they felt made them nervous. And then, they were either accused of not understanding or misrepresenting, something, lying about, an arrest. And then they were denied for 5 years or something to that effect. And I actually had one case where I was the attorney, but the client just wanted help with the process, and she didn't want She didn't want me to attend the interview. She wanted to save some money, right? Which is the most vital part. I think on the road of your immigration, process, it's one of the most vital moments. And she decided to go on her own. And the very first page of the application is asking the basis for your naturalization application. Sometimes they'll say, because been a resident for 5 years or more, or I'm married to a U.S. citizen for 3 years, or something to that effect. And the officer asked her, which no one ever asks this. Normally they don't ask about this. He asked her about the basis for her, application. Like, how are you legally eligible to apply for permanent residency? And she felt that she understood it as he was questioning how she got her residency, and
Mm,
it was legitimate. I mean, there was no question about her eligibility, and she became very nervous and anxious, and because she really wasn't able to answer the question, oh, I've been a resident for 5 years, he denied her, saying that she didn't understand English, and
right.
it was the first question, and it was denied.
Yeah.
So
Mm,
it happens.
yeah.
So
But that wouldn't have happened if you had been present.
no, absolutely not.
Because the rules say that if an applicant doesn't understand a question, they have every right to say, can you phrase that differently? Or I don't understand the question. Can you word it differently? Or
Can you explain it to me?
can you explain it? Can we come back to it? When I'm not so nervous after I've answered some other questions. Those are totally legitimate ways to handle that. And I'm sure if you had been there,
Oh,
you
yeah.
could have requested that yourself, or the officer wouldn't have been as comfortable making a decision like that when there was an advocate and a witness present. Because
Right.
that's not what we're supposed to do. And, I've seen this myself and it's very frustrating because officers have a lot of discretion to decide whether someone is qualified or not in terms of their English proficiency, which I don't even have sometimes, clearly. So I had some clients one time show up at the San Antonio field office about an hour before I did, right? We had an agreed upon arrival time. They got there early and they went inside before I arrived. The officer came and got them almost immediately. So almost, an hour and a half before their designated appointment time. And it was a husband and wife. They had filed at the same time. So they were both interviewed, kind of back to back. So he takes them both to his office before I get there. They don't insist that he wait for me. And by the time I got there, their interview was over and they had both been denied for not speaking English well enough.
Yeah.
And so, it was a real lesson in, how to prepare clients and, basically wait for me. Don't go in until I'm there. That's my new rule. Or it's not new anymore, but it became my new rule after that. And understanding that, like, since I wasn't present, I couldn't say, yes, their English was good enough. And
Right.
you're right. So anyway, I think that your point about, this is one of the most critical moments. That's a really good moment to have an attorney present and to have invested in representation. If you're at all concerned about eligibility based on past criminal history, based on physical presence, if that is at all in question, that's another one where they will go after you and reconfigure your physical presence if they don't agree with what you've got in your application. Your English proficiency, if there's any concern about that, it's really, really good to have an advocate present. Diego, okay, so you mentioned the civics, the reading and the writing. How is the civics test handled typically?
Well, so the civics test, people will find the app where they take the civics test and it's all multiple choice. Well, that's not how it's handled. The officer will read to you the question and you will answer verbally. So, and it's not incredibly difficult. Sometimes people see that the questions that there are 100 questions, and some questions have more than one answer. Well, out of those 100, you're going to be asked 10 questions, and out of those 10, you need to have 6 correct. And sometimes you just have to give one answer. You don't have to give every single answer for, every possible answer for a question. And the majority, it's been a very long time since I've attended an interview where the individual fails the civics test. I would say maybe one in the last 5 years. And one of the things that we do is we'll prepare you for the civics test. But that's how it's handled. It's asked and answered. It's not going to be something where you're going to be given a iPad and you're going to have a multiple choice. So you do have to be able to answer those questions verbally.
Yeah. And in your experience, are there certain questions that almost always get asked and certain ones that almost never get asked?
I would say lately, I feel like they're asking the vast majority of the questions. Like it seems very, oh, I do believe the one I hear the most is what is the rule of law? And it's, the answer is no one's above the law, or everybody must obey the law. And
right.
And we can criticize that, but that would be a whole other video. But that's probably the one that I would say the most. That's pretty common, but I do think that they are randomly generated.
Yeah, I think they are by and large. I think that the officers may have some discretion to fiddle with them a little bit. The reading and writing test, Diego. What do you have to share with us about the reading and writing in English?
Well, so normally the reading will be first, and usually it will be a question that you're reading, and then they'll ask you to write the answer. Now the officer will tell you what the answer is. We'll ask you what to write. So let's say it's the White House is in Washington, D.C. Or
and the question might have been that you had to read, where does the president live, or where is the White House located, or something like that.
And it doesn't have to be 100% grammatically correct and every single word spelled correctly, but it has to be understood what you're saying, and it has to reflect what the officer has read to you. So, again, and you can ask them to repeat it. And, I would say most officers do. Like when they see that you're, still writing, they will continue to repeat it as often as you need in order to finish it.
Right.
But it's fairly simple. And I have a list of sentences. There is there's no USCIS approved list of sentences, but many of those sentences that come out from the civics questions. And I've kind of collected some sentences throughout the years that I often hear. And sometimes I'll provide it, especially for individuals that are really, really struggling in their English, but they want to take the chance and do it. So, I provide them those sentences.
Yeah. Yeah. So what happens if somebody doesn't pass?
If you don't pass and it's your first interview, you get a second interview, you get a second opportunity. And that's really great because, sometimes people's nerves get the best of them. And, sometimes the interview comes so fast that they didn't even prepare. this happened just last, I think it was like October, where I told my client, I gave her the average time for interviews, and I think at the time was like 13 months, and her interview came in like 3.5. And so when I
Yeah.
called her and I said, "Hey, you're got your appointment scheduled. We'll have it in 2 weeks," and she admitted, "It's like, oh, abogado, I have not been studying my questions," and
Right.
so
Got it time.
sometimes, yeah. So it came so fast. She still passed. She buckled down and did it, and but it can happen like that.
Right. So you do get a second opportunity. And what happens at the second interview?
It's the same thing. So you might, so you will, usually the people that fail the interview have to do the whole thing. It usually ends in with the civics, like they didn't pass and they just have to go and they do the civics. They have to do the reading. They have to do the writing. But now sometimes it might be that they passed the test, but it's the actual application where the English and the phrasing gets confused, and then they need to go back and finish the review of the application.
Just talking about it. Yeah.
Right.
I've had this happen a number of different ways where sometimes someone will pass the conversation, but not the civics. And then they won't even get to the reading and writing because you don't pass the civics test. They'll just stop the interview. I've seen it where they pass everything except one part, and then they have to go back and just do that one part. So recently, it was last year, I think, the first time I had ever seen a client not pass the writing part, and that was the only part he didn't pass. And it was, you were talking about the spelling, and his spelling was too phonetic. It was, they will, if you were to say, take the word Washington and spell it with, it's instead of TON at the end, like maybe TEN or TIN, that would probably be okay because they could clearly see that you were still spelling Washington. But this client had it spelled with like a GU at the front.
Yeah.
Rather than the W. And so it was phonetic for Spanish, for his, original language, but it wasn't clearly understandable to the officer. I think they kind of knew what he was getting at, but he didn't pass that part, my client.
Yeah.
So he had to go back and just do the writing part. And that was all he had to do. And so it was easy for him to, once he studied a little more and got the spelling down a little bit better on some of those sentences that you share, he was good to go. He got it, but that can happen. Like you can have to go back just for misspelling Washington. If you really butcher it in English, right? Like, according to that. Yeah. So, what if you don't pass the second time? Then what happens?
Then you have to reapply. And I've had clients say, well, like, am I going to lose my residency if I don't pass? No, you're not going to lose your residency if you didn't pass. It just means you have to pay that money again in order to do the whole process again. I can't remember a client failing a second interview. I just can't. So I think people, once that becomes real, and they have that experience, I think they really just try harder and will buckle down to study and they'll do it.
Yes.
But yeah, if you fail, then you got to go a second time. And if you fail that second time, then you have to reapply. And it sucks, but it's not the end of the world. At least you tried, and you'll be a resident either way. They can't just take it away. That's the number one fear.
Yeah, failing the citizenship test is not a ground of deportability. You have to be deportable in order to have your residency taken away, and that requires usually some kind of criminal conviction.
Right.
Now, I will say that if you have criminal stuff in your past and you, for example, like what if you like lied in your residency process or something like that? Well, then you can apply for citizenship, and there is a risk that you will be arrested, detained, potentially put into deportation proceedings if you have committed some kind of crime or lied about it in your process in the past. So if you have anything like that, definitely consult with an attorney before you apply.
Right. And and it's got to be really serious if they're arresting you at the interview.
That's right.
In 20 almost 24 years, I remember, like, at an office where I've worked at, only once it happened where an attorney had a client arrested at the interview. It hasn't happened to me. But yeah, if there is something seriously, like, wrong in your case, criminal type situation, widespread fraud type situation, that is a possibility.
Yeah. Short of that, though, very little possibility. It's definitely not a crime to fail the application.
Yes.
It's definitely not. So I wanted to say one other thing before we got to the questions that we have. We have a question in Spanish from Sergio. And so I don't remember what it was now, but
was it we talked about the oath, understanding the oath?
Go ahead.
So the very last part of the application for the naturalization application, there's these 6 questions, and they all go to the heart of the oath of allegiance. So oath of allegiance, you're swearing to be loyal to the United States. And these are things that actually, I think if you look at the application, it might be in the last page or the 18th page of the application. And I will let clients know, and sometimes I'll even do a translation of it so that they can see it in their own language and understand what it means. And it does have really old language that is not commonly used or often used in the United States. And it's important to understand that. And some clients, it's funny because they're being asked all these questions, like, have they ever been arrested or been involved in smuggling or terrorism? So all the questions are like, no, 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 no. And then they go, do you swear to be loyal to the are you willing to take the oath of allegiance to the United States? And they go, no. I'm like, wait, no. I mean, yes. So they're so used to just saying no, 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 no. And then it's yes all of a sudden. In the last questions, the answers hopefully should be yes. And so you got to understand that. And that's, so again, that's part of your understanding. And that's part of our work, is to help you understand what you are swearing to. So
that's right. Yeah, that's really important. The other thing that I've seen people miss up in the interview context is the question about, have you ever made a false claim? Have you ever falsely claimed to be a U.S. citizen? And it's such a weird phrasing. Again, like, we don't really say it like that. What they mean to ask is, have you ever said you were a U.S. citizen when you're not? And have you ever lied about that? And I've had a number of clients just kind of jump in here like U.S. citizen, and they say yes, like that's I want to be a U.S. citizen, right? Yeah. And so now we prepare and train for that, in the leading up to the interview. But it's important for people to be aware that question is a little weird and tricky too, and so just you have to listen really carefully to what the officer is asking before you answer.
Definitely.
So. Anything else we want to share about the interview process? I know there is an appeal process, right? Diego, what's that like?
Well, so yes, there is. So let's say that you feel that that now this usually doesn't come in the context of the test, but let's say that you feel that immigration made the wrong decision in denying your application. Then instead of reapplying for naturalization, you can apply to have them reconsider that their decision, and that's through a form called an N-336. And this is where I had a case where my client was denied. They were claiming that he lied in his application for a residency, and then in the actual N-400 application, they said that he lied when he said that he had never provided false information in an immigration process.
Right.
And this was a very unique situation, because when he left his country, his girlfriend had been pregnant, and the family did not allow him to have any contact with her or the child that was born. And not until he got residency could he travel back to his country and challenge the paternity. And when he was able to show that he was the father and that he wanted to be involved in the child's life, and he was granted some he was granted paternity, and then he had some rights. And later, when he was doing his N-400, he included her in the application. And they tried it, and sometimes when they see this, immigration's not wrong. Like, maybe you were married before, maybe you had a family that you're trying not to claim. This wasn't the situation. He said, look, like, I wasn't 100% sure. They didn't let me have any contact with her whatsoever. I couldn't even speak to my ex-girlfriend anymore. And so, but I challenged it. I won. And we did the N-336. And that is how we were able to get his the decision reversed in his naturalization. And that's a process that you're able to do. And then there's a process that you know what to do, and that's taking it to federal court.
Yeah. So that's an.
Oh, I don't know if we lost. Well, we lost Jennifer, but so Jennifer, so Jennifer takes federal court cases, and another way to challenge, and you don't have to file the N-336 with the with USCIS. You can take it straight to federal court. And normally those are cases that may be harder to challenge with the N-336 appeal process. And when a federal judge sees that you are, that you merit approval, that judge can grant you your naturalization. And so that's another process if you are denied the application process. So, it's something that we do and something that we would be able to advise you on. The last question from Sergio Martínez is, hola, saludos, tengo una pregunta para renovar la residencia de 10 años que compraste. Necesito, gracias. I don't know if he's saying, well, anyway, let's say that he got a residency and he's looking to renew. You got to renew. I don't quite understand the last part of the question, but if you're renewing your residency, do it within 6 months of the expiration date. I would say do it right on the 6 months. If it's your first renewal, I do believe that they process it a lot faster than if you got your residency through amnesty. It's just those take a lot longer, and I think it's because they don't have the files digitized. Sergio, deberías de renovar la aplicación unos 6 meses antes del vencimiento de la tarjeta para que eso es lo más temprano que uno puede solicitar la renovación. Y normalmente, si es la primera renovación, es algo que se va a hacer, en mi experiencia, rápido. Pero si eres una persona que arregló por medio de amnistía, esos casos he visto que duran más tiempo para renovar y es porque tal vez el expediente no está en el sistema escaneado como los nuevos casos. So Jennifer, I think I tried answering your question about the federal.
Yeah. I'm sorry about the mishap with my camera, but okay. But I heard you respond, and you did a great job. So yeah, right. N-336 and or federal court are both recourses for people who want to fight their denial. And Sergio's question, pienso, Diego, que esta pregunta está preguntando ¿qué comprobantes necesito? Me imagino.
Comprobantes, ok.
No estoy 100% segura, pero imagino que esa es una pregunta que me hacen mucho. ¿Qué necesito para poder renovar mi residencia? Y
Yeah.
en mi experiencia, solo realmente renovar, nada más cuesta una copia de la tarjeta de residente. No necesitas probar elegibilidad a partir de eso. ¿En tu experiencia necesitan algo más a partir de la tarjeta, Diego?
No, la solicitud tiene que completarse correctamente, una copia de la tarjeta y los honorarios del gobierno, la dirección correcta donde quieres que se mande y no deberías de necesitar más. Tienes que poner atención porque te van a dar una cita para las huellas o a veces pueden rehusar las que están en el sistema y después de eso es paciencia y esperar.
Mucha paciencia. También he visto que cuestan mucho tiempo cuando es una residencia más antigua, pero aún en esos casos se puede viajar todavía, se puede trabajar todavía es residente.
No se
Aunque
vence la residencia.
exacto, solo se vence la prueba de la residencia. Es residente todavía, se puede hacer todas las privilegios y todo que aplican a los residentes mientras que está pendiente la nueva tarjeta. If we don't have other questions, la otra cosa, Sergio, que iba a decir es que esa aplicación se puede hacer ahora en línea y en mi experiencia va más rápido cuando uno se hace en línea, si es posible, si usted tiene acceso a una computadora y se puede manejar ese proceso en la computadora. No es mandatorio, se puede hacer también a través del correo postal todavía, pero cuesta un poquito menos y va un poquito más rápido si se hace en línea ahora. So with that, I don't think we have other questions. Diego, are you ready for your weekend?
I think I am. Wish everybody happy Memorial Day. It's
Yes.
marking the beginning of the summer, and it's when we remember fallen soldiers, military who have in the line of service. So it's a good holiday. Everybody have a safe holiday. Take care. If it's hot, drink a lot of water.
Sí, claro. Thank you, Diego. I appreciate your time. I'll see you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.
All right. See you Tuesday.
All right. Bye.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.